Now, I never promised consistency because I knew I wouldn't be able to stick to any promises of, you know, uploads on certain dates or so many times per week or anything like that. So let's just accept that about me, and I hope you enjoy this video anyway, despite the long absence. So today I'm going to be talking about a reading challenge called The Hardest Reading Challenge You'll Ever Do. It was organised by a YouTuber called Qwerty, whose username is Qwerty, and they basically, I think, set it up as a sort of a birthday present to themselves to run from, I think it was the 7th of July 2024 to the 6th of July this year. I gave it a go. Let's go through all the books together and see how I did. I won't go into detail about all the different rules and the setup, but basically the main thing you need to know is that there was a bingo square, so 25 squares. The ideal to complete the hardest reading challenge you ever do was to get a full blackout, every square ticked off. I know I didn't do that because there were some prompts I didn't complete, but I think there's some chance of me getting a bingo line. I just haven't done any of the ticking off the prompts because I wanted to do that through with you, so we'll see. But because there's so many titles in this challenge, I am going to try and keep things snappy. So let's get started. So the first prompt was to complete a 500+ page book in one day, and I completed that prompt by reading this book. I don't know if it's pronounced 2120 or 2120. But it is a choose your own adventure kind of graphic novel, horror, surreal, strange. The you character, because it's all from your point of view, is an IT technician who turns up at a building and finds it locked, but then ends up going inside through choices you make, and it's very backrooms but horror. And it's exactly 500 pages because the cover counts as well. I can't say I enjoyed it, but then I'm not really a horror fan. And I did get stuck at one point in a kind of a loop where I was... Now, it seemed like no matter what choice I made, I kept kind of having to go back to the same point in the story, which got a bit frustrating. But yes, so I can tick that one off. Then, having started with just one book needed to complete that prompt, the next prompt is called the A to Z challenge. This is, as you'd expect, a book for each letter of the alphabet. So this included titles and author's first name and author's surname, which is important for some of the harder letters. So let's try and fly through these. So, A, At Bertram's Hotel by Agatha Christie. This is Miss Marple. It kind of veered a bit silly at the end, but I still enjoyed it. B, I read Berserker, which is a graphic novel. I can't find most of the graphic novels for this challenge. I think I might have got rid of it. I really didn't like it. It was Keanu Reeves' story about like an immortal, amazing warrior. It was just a load of nonsense, basically. I didn't enjoy it. C was the Cybernetic Tea Shop. This is an ebook. A robot running a tea shop. For D, I chose Death of a Bookseller by Alice Slater. A perfectly fine little thriller. Some of these I've read so long ago, I'm actually a bit worried that I won't be able to tell you anything about them. I think this one did kind of keep me on my toes. I didn't expect fully what happened. For E, I went with The Examiner by Janice Hallett. This is one of her multimedia books. I enjoy them all. Like, I think the Christmas appeal is the only one that I thought was a bit stupid. This one had some interesting things going on, and it's about art students. So it's a pity that there's no pictures or anything of the art from what I remember. But it's more transcriptions and essays they had to write and messages on their kind of student forum where they all talk to each other. And the detective kind of characters are interesting because they're sort of external invigilators who are going through all this information, and then they're like kind of like, hang on, I feel like somebody is missing and somebody was murdered midway through, and the external examiner is basically checking through their work and seeing if that's right. If I read The Faint of Heart, which was a graphic novel, so I've misplaced it or sold it, I don't remember. If I'm remembering correctly, it was the YA one about hearts being put in jars, like taken out of people and leaving them very emotionless, and a girl's attempt to kind of restore her sister's heart and investigate this system. It would have been alright if they'd gone full fantasy, but because they were trying to blend science and fantasy, it didn't really work. I didn't really rate it very highly. Sorry. So for G, I chose Good Girl, Bad Blood by Holly Jackson. Is this the second book in the Good Girl's Guide to Murder series? I couldn't distinguish this one from the series overall, but this is the missing person one. But I enjoy the series, so this must have been good. I'm filming this video in August, by the way, so not only were some of these read a year ago, but the challenge has been over for a month, and I'm just, as we know, falling behind. Okay, H. That was a last-minute edition. There are surprisingly few books that begin with H, but How to Seal Your Own Fate was one of them. Kristen Perrin, so the sequel to How to Solve Your Own Murder. This follows the same themes as the first book about like a prophecy, murder victims, small town investigation. This felt like kind of an in-between book. I'll be interested to see where she goes with these characters from here, because there's only so long you can rely on the same tropes and themes to carry you through. It was kind of, you know, it was okay, it just wasn't amazing. Imposter Syndrome by Joseph Knox. This was a disappointment just because I enjoyed his first book so much that, you know, he had this tricky second album problem. It's about con man, which is normally a story I like, but it wasn't that convincing that he was a very good con man, although like, even he felt he could pull it off. It was just a bit strange. Then for J, I went for the first time using an author's name, so Redwall by Brian Jacks. This was actually specifically chosen for one of the later prompts that we'll get to, but it worked. There were some lines you could double up. I'll explain later why I chose that book later on, but you know, it was a cute little classic fantasy, medieval-esque, with a quest, and it just, this time it was small animals instead of humans. K, I chose Kraken by China Miéville, but I can't find my physical copy of it. This again actually was a bit of a disappointment. It's not a good theme for the challenge, just because I had heard such good things about China Miéville's books, and I bought so many of them because I just kind of, well, I mean, you know, I bought 3 of them because I just found a particular edition style in the shops. So I made that mistake of buying multiple titles from an author before I'd even read one of them. It was strange, urban fantasy, about the end of the world, apocalyptic events that start off with a giant squid being stolen from the Natural History Museum. Which sounds like a great plot, but there was just something about the writing style that didn't gel with me. For L, I went for The Last Murder at the End of the World. This I should have loved because it was Stuart Turton and I've loved all his other books. I mean, there's only 2 others, but they were both 5 stars. This, I feel like it had interesting ideas, but maybe it was trying to do too much all at once. It was like post-apocalyptic, but mystery set on an island, so a kind of closed community. There was sci-fi stuff, there was an AI, and it just didn't quite gel, I felt. M is for The Mysterious Affair at Styles. I actually did a Solve-Along video for this. I've got a whole bunch of videos that like there's footage on an SD card, but I haven't done any editing. And the one I did start editing, I realised I only had half the footage. I have no idea where the second half has gone. So that kind of deflated my sales for a bit. But anyway, I can't tell you anything about this book because I may still edit that video one day. Let's just leave it at that. For N, we're going for an author's name again. So this time, a graphic novel I could find called Horizontal Collaboration. And you can might just be able to see it here, but the author's name is Navi. Are they the author or the artist? Actually, I don't know. I assume both are allowed. This was super interesting. It was about a relationship that springs up under the Nazi occupation of Paris. I found this very interesting because my family are from Jersey, which was the only part of the British Isles that was occupied during the Second World War. So the events of this I could very easily match up with what I knew from like the Jersey War Tunnels Museum. And so because of that I kind of knew how it would pan out. But yeah, really good. And not a topic you see very often in World War II stories. But O, I read The Orchid Thief. Can't find my copy of it. What a strange book about a strange man. So I haven't made my mind up if I like that type of investigative journalist writing where they're writing about the topic they're looking into, but they are also writing about themselves and why they chose to write and how they went about the process of it and their research. There's a whole video where I read maybe like 3 of these books are in one of my Plastic Free July videos, so I'll link it up in the corner. For P, The Player of Games by Ian M. Banks, so the second book in the Culture series, and generally considered the best. I love a good board game, so this was interesting to me. There were some scenes that they just very much remind you that this is a classic sci-fi written by a man. And if you're reading classic sci-fi like I do, you just have to accept that sometimes. You're just going to come across something and be like, well, that was of its time. But I do still want to continue in the Culture series. I haven't read any further than this. So Q, we're going for author's name again, their first name this time. So the book is Death of a Red Heroine, and it's the first in the Inspector Chen series. Actually, I think this is the author's surname, because they're Chinese, so it's written differently from wherever I copied and pasted the name from. I'll put it on the screen. I believe it's Q Xiaolong. This was a frantic last minute read. As you can imagine, I found finding a book beginning with Q quite difficult. So I was trawling through Libby trying to find something. I don't think I'll be continuing in the series, but it was interesting because it's quite a different setting from like every other murder mystery I've read. It's kind of late stage communist China. He's written a lot about things like how resources were allocated, like apartments, and how you had to have like certain social status to get an apartment. And so our main character is seen as being like not quite like scammed the system or played the system, but just lucky that he's been allocated somewhere even though he's single and doesn't have children. There's a lot of cultural stuff around like status within the police department and within the Communist Party. And some of it was sort of, this is after the Cultural Revolution, after Mao has died, so I think it's set in the 1990s. So there's kind of the remnants of the old party and the old philosophies, but clashing with the modern, kind of becoming more modernized, becoming more capitalist China and society. And this is very much shown in the person who's murdered is a young woman who has like a private life that's very different to her public persona, and how she's called a red heroine because she is sort of used as like a poster girl for the party at her workplace. I'm kind of talking myself into continuing the series. Maybe I'll give it one more book in the series a go, I don't know, because it wasn't so much the main plot of the murder that was interesting, it was all the, like, for lack of a better word, world building around it. Yeah, I don't know, we'll see. I don't own any of them, so it's not going to be a priority. Okay, moving on. So for R, I went with The Rose Rent by Ellis Peters and made some progress in the Cadfael series. I don't think I can tell you anything specifically about this. A man is murdered in Shrewsbury and Cadfael investigates. The themes of this particular book are around like the role of a widow in this 12th century society, and whether, you know, she should be married as soon as possible, so like she shouldn't be alone, and, you know, how can a widow possibly look after herself and that kind of thing. Yeah, I mean, they're all like, you know, much of a muchness. I don't remember if there was an annoying romance subplot in that one in particular, but I've read more since then, so again, with series they kind of like merge together. Okay, S. Another one from my Plastic Free July video, so The Sea Around Us by Rachel Carson. I love this edition I was able to get many years ago, but I listened to this in an audiobook because this is such a vintage book, like I almost don't want to open the pages all the way. This is by Rachel Carson, most well known for The Silent Spring, which was one of the books that kickstarted the green movement by pointing out particularly things around pesticides. But this predates that. This is her true background is she's a marine biologist, I think, some title like that. And so this is her writing about the sea and various different elements of it, and the mysteries of the sea and the things that they've observed but can't quite answer. And reading this in 2024, you realise some of the things she's noticing at the start of climate change, but she didn't know that at the time. So it's interesting as a historical artifact of this is what they knew then, and it's interesting that they admit they don't know everything. I would really like a revised edition because some of the questions I want to know if the answer is found out. Then, so for T, there's another one from that video. This is Not a Drill from Extinction Rebellion. This is broken down into different sections, some of which is sciencey, some of which is about action, some is about... But the section that most interested me is the accounts of the big Extinction Rebellion protest that was in London a couple of years ago, and people's experiences of it. And I'm just interested in things like the logistics of such a big event because I work in the event industry. I don't live in London, so I wasn't directly affected by it. But okay, you finally read The Unadulterated Cat by Terry Pratchett. This is just a silly little book, not related to any of his theories, but you can tell he was a cat lover. His ideas around cats are somewhat old-fashioned now. He makes a joke in this, which has definitely got, you know, you wouldn't write it nowadays. And if you look up reviews online, people will say like, you know, really didn't appreciate the rape joke. It's that type of joke, but it's not about that. It's about a cat versus a car. It's, you know, like I say, it's just of its time again. You wouldn't write it nowadays, but you know, it's a fun little book to read. So V, Voyage of the Damned by Frances White, which I was enjoying the audiobook so much I went out and bought myself a physical special edition. It's got like fishy scale stuff. It's from the Illumicrate edition. Probably one of my favourites so far on the list. A murder mystery on a boat in a fantasy world, closed circle because they're all on the boat and can't get off, and a very endearing main character taking on the detective role. Bit of found family, bit of romance. Yeah, all good. W, We Solve Murders by Richard Osman. Not as good as the Thursday Murder Club series for me. I don't know if that's because, you know, of some bias from nostalgia, but also I think not just personal bias. This is quite different in terms of being, spans a greater geographic area and they're kind of flying around. It's more like a thriller escapade. You know, Thursday Murder Club is more about small and cozy and a specific crime being investigated by old people. This does have a cute like investigation team of a guy and his daughter-in-law, but it was good, I just didn't find it as good as Thursday Murder Club. X, we get into author names, so Heavenly Tyrant by Xiran J. Zhao. This is a sequel to Iron Widow, which I read quite a while ago. And I spent the first quarter of this book kind of catching up and remembering things from the first book, and I couldn't even remember what a chrysalis is, and they're one of the main kind of world building elements of the story. Basically, this book is part action and fighting and big mecha robots battling, and part like political intrigue. And I think, from what I've seen of the reviews, people tend to love one and hate the other, but because the book is both, you're just like a bit meh about it. I preferred the political intrigue. Didn't really care about the big fighty robots, personally. Why? This has been on my TBR for absolutely ages. And it's the Yiddish Policemen's Union by Michael Chabon. I think because I heard that Cavalier and Clay was so good, and then I feel like this was up for some sci-fi awards, you know, back in the day. Oh yeah, Pulitzer Prize winning author. This is, I wouldn't call it sci-fi actually. The thing is, it's alternative history, and that often gets lumped in with sci-fi. The alternative history here is that instead of most of the European Jews staying in Europe during World War II and the terrible consequences of that, in this book there's like a resettlement law brought in by the American government, and so millions of them get transported to Canada, no, Alaska, to a particular, I think it's an island or maybe a peninsula called Sitka. I did look it up on Wikipedia because I was like, is this a real place? What was it like? Like, where is it in Alaska? This is, you know, a crime story. It really does. It's not an everyday person being the detective. It just genuinely is following a police officer as he investigates a murder, which has kind of seems like a small and seedy murder to begin with, but then has bigger consequences in the Jewish community and the politics of the area and a particular subset of Judaism. Not being Jewish and not knowing any Yiddish, I did find myself hearing words that I didn't know what they meant and just kind of rolling with it. I'm just like, I don't know what that means. Maybe, you know, trying to figure it out from the context. Particularly things like titles and like, not quite job descriptions or job titles, but like community titles within the community and different roles. Like, I know what a rabbi is, but there were different types of religious leaders in this. It didn't really keep me hooked though. It was one that I kind of picked up and put down, took a long time to read, because I just got the impression that the author was not a crime writer. Like, he'd written a crime book, but that wasn't his main genre. It's definitely more literary fiction. And then for Z, because yes, I did read the entire alphabet, Zoo City by Lauren Bukes. This is an ARC given to me as a gift a couple of Christmases ago. This is another mishmash of genres, so it's kind of got a weird fantasy element in that in this world, if you committed a crime, then two things happen. One, you get an animal attach itself to you, not physically, but like it comes to live with you no matter where you are in the world. You could be in prison and an animal will turn up to be your animal companion. Maybe not even a native species, just an animal. You have no say in it, it just turns up, and then it's like there as a marker to other people that you are a criminal. And the second thing is that you gain like a power or an ability. So the ability of our main character, Zinzi, is that she can find lost things, but it's not like a magic power that you have control over. It's a thing, the ability you gain. And because she's a criminal, she is kind of living at the edges of society with her sloth, that's her animal, and she's trying to get by like finding lost things and charging people for it. She's hired to find, even though she says she doesn't do finding lost people, she ends up in a situation where she has to find a teen pop star who's gone missing. It's set in Johannesburg, I believe. So that's just, you know, a different setting that, you know, I've normally read. And it's a zoo city. Oh, yeah, there. Zoo City is a area of Johannesburg where all these people with animals attached to them live. And I really liked it. It was an interesting read. Okay, so yes, as I said, I did the entire alphabet, and this was my biggest achievement in the entire thing. So now that we've completed the first 2 prompts and got off to a good start, let's slow things down to not quite so successful, because the 3rd prompt is 3 or more blurbs on a book. So the core book that I read for this challenge was A Sorceress Comes to Call by T. Kingfisher. My first T. Kingfisher that I didn't adore. It was good, I just didn't... I don't think I liked any of the characters, so that makes it hard to enjoy the book as much. It's not essential, but it's just more difficult. It's a retelling. It's in the fairy tale retelling series that she does. A young girl who's the daughter of a sorceress, and they go and marry a rich man in order to try and improve their fortune, but the sorceress is evil and horrible. In terms of the blurbs from the back, which this prompt is about, so I had to choose 3 blurbs from this list of authors and pick one of their books. So the ones I had to choose from were Naomi Novik, Alex E. Harrow, Catherine Addison, Katrina Ward, Tamora Pierce, Juliet Marillier, Seanan McGuire, and the New York Times. So I chose Catherine Addison, and I read The Goblin Emperor. I've heard such rave things about this, and I've read its kind of companion book. It's called Witness for the Dead and the Grief of Stones. They're kind of bound together, and they're both within the series called The Chronicles of Ostirith. But Witness for the Dead is the start of a separate series called The Cemeteries of Amalo, but this is a standalone. I didn't love this book as much as everybody else, but I think that's because I'd already read Witness for the Dead, and that was, I loved. So, because I was reading this second rather than the publication order, it was still great, but not as good as Witness for the Dead, and slightly saccharine, I can want to say. It's about a young man who becomes emperor unexpectedly because of a airship accident, which means his father, the emperor, and all the heirs all died at once. And so he comes to the throne in amongst this turmoil of was it an accident, was it murder, who did it? And then there's tensions with neighbouring countries, and because he was raised very separate from the court, he was never raised to be the heir or emperor, and so has a completely different upbringing, no training, no knowledge about the court and all the backstabbing in it. And so everybody's oh, what's he going to be like? What's he going to do? Is he going to kill everyone because he's pissed off at being exiled for his entire life? And actually, no, he doesn't do any of that. He's a very nice young man. So there was that. And then the second one I had in mind was Katrina Ward. So I read her book called The Last House on Needless Street, and I really liked it in a kind of creepy horror way. And so I wanted to read Looking Glass Sound. Don't think the audiobook was released for most of this year of the challenge, and I didn't get around to reading the ebook. This is the start of a theme, which is that I don't think I like ebooks. I didn't really realise that before this challenge, but because ebooks were kind of necessary for a few titles, I realised I hate reading on a screen, which is unfortunate, and was my downfall a couple of times. Anyway, the third book that I chose was from Seanan McGuire. I have no excuses this time, really. I chose Middle Game because I own it. I did try listening to the audiobook. It was really bad. The voice actor was doing the voice of the bad guy, like in a pantomime, stupid bad guy voice. And then didn't get around to reading the physical book, sorry. So can't tick that prompt, unfortunately. Moving on. Garage sale books. This is where we start to get into doubling up. which is allowed. So any of the books in the A to Z challenge are allowed to be doubled up in other prompts. So The Sea Around Us is what I chose for book number 1. Book number 2, I chose The Player of Games, and book number 3 is a new one for this book pile behind me. Slow Horses by Mick Perrin. Not actually this edition. I don't have the edition that I bought originally. This was given to me as a gift for Christmas as part of a box set. It seems weird to me that I read this about a year ago, because I'm now on book 6, I think, Joe Country, of this series. And we've watched 3, 4, however many seasons of the TV show there's been. So yeah, I only got into this series because of this reading challenge, which, big win for me. And Chris, he's enjoyed the TV series. Oh, I've been talking too much. That tea is not the right temperature anymore. Never mind. But yeah, so Slow Horses, first book in the Slough House series. Basically about a bunch of spies who have mucked up in some way, and so they get pushed to the side to a building called Slough House, the reject home for spies, run by a very interesting character. And each book follows a national emergency, which results in the Slow Horses having to stick their noses back in where they're not welcome. Yeah, and that's the first book that kicks it all off. So I can tick that prompt. Okay, then prompt number, what are we up to, 5. Not so great on this one. So the prompt is 5 AuthorTuber books. This is where things start to go a bit downhill for me, because up until this point I was really able to prioritise books that were already on my TBR, I already owned physically. But the problem is I don't watch any AuthorTubers, so this is where I started having to like dig around and scrounge around for titles. This was a challenge for me personally. So the ones, I did choose 5 for the 5 books for this necessary for this prompt, but I only read 2 of them, 2-ish. So the first book I feel really bad about because it's written by the creator of the challenge. I will read it one day, but it's The Humane Society for Creatures and Cryptids. I'll read it one day, I just haven't yet. Book number 2 also sucks because I do own it physically. It's Breach of Peace by Daniel Green. Again, I've owned it quite a while, didn't get around to reading it. Book 3, Paper Towns by John Green. It was fine. It was, you know, a YA story. There's some elements I liked, like the kind of almost like a treasure hunt kind of element that they went on. A friend of mine on Storygraph really hated it for its like manic pixie dream girl character, but I saw what John was getting at, it, you know, that's not what she actually is. Book 4, I chose Just Stab Me Now by Jill Berup. I haven't actually watched that many of her videos, I'm just like, I occasionally see them on my page. I started reading this, but as an ebook, so I wasn't really getting along with it, and I don't think the style was for me really. It was a book within a book, and that in a book is a fantasy book. How many times can I say the word book? And the outer story is about the author writing the inner story. Just didn't quite feel like my kind of thing. And then the 5th book I chose was a non-fiction, Will My Cat Eat My Eyeballs? It was an easy audiobook listen, essentially a series of questions presented to a mortician by children. So all the questions are quite interesting. I don't think it really told me anything I didn't already know, but it definitely went into more detail, particularly around things like the decomposition process. But you know, I've seen CSI, I know roughly what she was on about. So, can't tick that prompt. We're 3 out of 5 at the moment. Next line, so a series of 4 or more books, and you have to complete the series. I did complete the series, yay! I read, what is the series called? It's called The Rainwild Chronicles, is the overall name. So it starts with Dragon Keeper and then Dragon Haven, and I don't have books 3 and 4. I listened to them in audiobook by Robin Hobb. Excellent, as always with Robin Hobb. This follows young people living in the rain wilds and is a sequel to earlier books about dragons, but this goes much more into the process of the dragons being born, and then they can't stay near people because they're too destructive and resource intensive. So these young dragon keepers are enlisted to take them to try and find a city which is talked about in local legends, but nobody actually knows where it is. There's no archaeological evidence, so they have to go and try and find it basically, but the city is essentially dooming them all. Like, they're just like, yeah, to go get these horrible dragons away from us. I don't think they really care whether dragon keepers come back or not. And then obviously it links into all the other books of this world. And then from a high we go back to a low. So 5 books from 5 small booktubers. So this time's recommendations. Another double up, so the Cybernetic Tea Shop was recommended by Qwerty. Not in the initial video, but I think she made a second video with some recommendations and I got a bunch from there. But I couldn't just take 5 recommendations from her. I had to search around. I don't follow many small booktubers, which is perhaps a bit hypocritical. But the second book I did find and choose was An AI's Story, subtitled Kill Switch. That was recommended by Maeve, I believe. I didn't read it though. I'm sure you can guess why. Recurring theme. I could only get it as an ebook. I didn't already own a physical copy. And then, I'm loath to admit, I didn't even come up with books 3, 4 and 5. Now, next prompt. Let's just leave that behind us and move on to the next prompt, which is 5 books in other countries / author from another country, and it has to be not American, British or Canadian. So book number 1 is actually not set in a specific country, but is set in a continent, which is not North America, Europe. So yeah, so that is Africa is Not a Country by Dipo Faloyin, subtitle Breaking Stereotypes of Modern Africa. Really interesting. Kind of a mix of personal anecdotes, he's Nigerian, and also case studies, particularly around stereotypes, but also like within each stereotype he had like a case study of different dictators and like how they came to power and the different kind of styles of dictators, as it were. And then also talking about the whole charity industry, both in terms of voluntourism and also things like big charities and their fundraising approaches and the kind of imagery they use, the kind of messaging about how it's not indicative of modern countries. Talks about, yeah, like Live Aid as a historic example. Second book for that prompt, oh, it's a bit borderline, but I noted down The Last Murder at the End of the World. I mean, it's set on a Greek island, but I say it's borderline because of its sci-fi setting and time period. It's not like modern day Greek island. It's not even historic Greek. There's nothing particularly Greek about it. I really should have chosen a different one. I'm sure there's some here. Book number 3 is a horizontal collaboration, as I said, set in Paris. Book number 4, Into Thin Air, a recommendation from my sister. So this is set on Everest. It's non-fiction, but the main people taking part are European, but it does definitely talk about the Nepalese communities and particular people and their history with the mountain and the people who come to climb it. And then 5th book in this prompt, another new one. It's City of Destruction by Vaseem Khan. This is interesting because I never would have read this without this challenge, which is really gratifying and kind of makes it worthwhile. This is part of it, again, a detective series. I can't remember how many books into the series it is. I want to say like at least 3 or 4. Oh, it's the 5th. Malabar House series. So I was, somewhat hampered by the fact that I didn't know who these people were and what their history, interpersonal relations were. Oh, it's set in Bombay, by the way. So this is police investigation kind of story, proper detectives, not amateurs, and it's just after India's gained independence. So there's like political, cultural, racial, religious conflicts between the various groups in India at that time. And then additionally, our main detective is the first female detective in this police department, so that has a whole extra layer of problems. And it centres around that basically there's a assassination attempt, but it's not successful, but the would-be assassin is killed by our police detective, so she has a lot of guilt over that, but she also is investigating, like, why was he even trying to shoot this politician? Who was this young man and what's going on? I think this is the kind of thing where if I found the earlier books in a secondhand bookstore, I would definitely pick them up, but I don't think I'd go out of my way to buy them. But I might carry on with the series, so I don't know, like, is that a good idea? I didn't like the title of the book though, or the reason for that being the title. I thought that was a bit stupid, a bit far-fetched, but yeah, whatever. 5 non-Eurocentric books, tick. So then we move on to our second purple prompt, which is called the Queer Rainbow Challenge. So again, these can be doubled up with any of the prompts I've already said, or any of the ones to come. So yeah, working through the LGBTQIA. L, lesbian, I chose Malmo, graphic novel I can't find. It was a cute little story about witches in the countryside and the problems that are arising there in their community, and they have to fix, and they got like family trauma which prevents them from being there to solve problems. And then G, gay, I went with Dragon Keeper up here. I mean, what can I say on these prompts other than there's a gay character, there's a lesbian character, like, it is what it is. T, trans, I've written Voyage of the Damned, wherever that's got to. I don't remember which character is trans, but I've written it, so I'm just gonna trust past me to have got that right. Bi/Pan, they've lumped these two together. Graveyard Shift by M.L. Rio. Lots of people are really disappointed by this because it's the first book that she's written since If We Were Villains, which obviously was such a like cult hit. I thought it was okay, but the thing is, it's horror and it's fungal horror in particular. And as we know, I'm not like a huge horror fan, and I can see why some people wouldn't like this because it's a novella, and so it does end on like a cliffhanger, essentially. Very unresolved ending. But it's about a group of people who meet in a graveyard every night to smoke together. And then one night, whilst they're there, they find a freshly dug grave in what should be a historic graveyard with nobody being buried. And so they start to look into what on earth is going on with that. Again, don't remember who was by or Pan, but yep, trust past me to have noted it correctly. Q, Questioning, Case Histories by Kate Atkinson. This is another book I had high hopes for because this is the first book in a series that follows a particular detective. Although he's a private investigator nowadays, but he used to be police, and so yeah, it's the first in a book following him. This is, I think the problem is I expected the case histories and this to be much more interwoven, and they just weren't. Not so much. And so I think that just gave me a sense of disappointment. One of the characters in here goes through quite a change in their love life and identity. So that's why they're questioning. I'm going to skip a section and say, hang on, I'm just going to double check. For asexual, I've written the cybernetic tea shop. Oh no, it's okay. I did mention that earlier, but it's okay because this is a purple prompt, so it can be doubled up. Can it be tripled up? Because I put it under C and 5 Small Booktubers and Rainbow Challenge. I think, I vaguely recall that's fine within the rules. But yes, the non-robot character in that book is asexual. Now, I skipped I because I is the problem. I for intersex. Firstly, quite hard to find generally, but secondly, I screwed up. During Quody's recommendation video, they mentioned that the book Flawless Girls is their recommendation for a book about an intersex character. So I watched this video right at the beginning of the challenge, so I was sort of thought, okay, great, yeah, tick, done. Flawless Girls, noted it down. It's by Anna-Marie McLemore. I've never read any of their books before, but I've heard good things about them, so I was like, yes, that's in the bank. I don't need to worry about that. Come June this year, I realise in a frantic rush that I need to hurry up with this challenge, and I think, okay, now I'll read Flawless Girls, right, ready to go. Turns out it's released in America, it is not released in the UK. So my book that was safely in the bank, saving for later, absolute muck up. And I do have an American library card through Libby, but it's not available at that library. So, and I looked on the New Zealand library as well, couldn't find it there. I looked on eBay in case like somebody had an American copy of the book for sale. Nope. So I cannot tick that prompt off, unfortunately. And this is where I really shot myself in the foot. I had Flawless Girls noted for multiple prompts, so I failed multiple of them because I didn't sort my shit out far enough in advance and find a copy of a book that's not published in my country. Nor did I find an alternative for I. The other one mostly recommended was Across Green Grass Fields, but I'd already read that, and you can't reread books for this challenge. So, no tick for me. Okay. Next prompt, 5 lowest rated books in your TBR. First book I chose, The Lost Art of Walking. It has an average rating of 3.2. I can't find my copy of it. I may well have gotten rid of it because it was so boring. I think I expected it to be more like And Did Those Feet, which is also a book about walking, but it's more like a travelogue, armchair travel kind of book, mixing history and travel together, whereas The Lost Art of Walking was just about walking. I skim read so much of this book, it was so boring. It was things like the author recounting how he broke his leg up on a walk, and then his recovery process, but also like historic examples of walking records, like people had achieved different kind of records in different styles of speed walking. Some, you know, just like in one go, some in stops and starts, and then there's like the female's record versus the male's record, and he talks about the art, the meshing with the art world, and like walking as a tourist activity around a neighborhood, but it was just a normal neighborhood. He measured like walking the same road but different times of the day. I think it was Oxford Street in London, and the different things that you would see at the different times of day. Surprise, surprise. In the beginning you saw people heading to work, in the middle you saw a bunch of tourists, and at the end you saw people heading to the pub after work. Wow, great revelation. I mean, it was a whole book, but I can't tell you any more than that. It was so dull. Book number 2, Murder on Lake Garda by Tom Hindle. Average rating 3.5. What can I tell you about this? It's a murder mystery. Problem with Tom Hindle is his first book was so good, and I really liked it. I didn't see the twist, I didn't see who the murderer was. It had a historic setting. All his books since then, I believe there's been 3. I haven't read The Murder Game, but I've not heard good things about it. I've read this, and I've read his newest one, and none of them live up to A Fatal Crossing. And is it because they're all contemporary rather than historic? I don't know for sure, but it's something I noticed when I was thinking about through things. Also, he bumps them out pretty quick. So I think maybe he's running them too quick, and there's too much like commercial pressure to just like get the next one out. And you know, maybe that works for murder mysteries because they can be quite formulaic, but I mean, okay, this was a bunch of rich people and there's a wedding on an island in Lake Garda, and they're mostly insufferable, and I didn't care about any of them. And I didn't care who the murderer was, and it was quite obvious why they'd been murdered. Like, he told us throughout the book it wasn't a mystery. Book number 3, Paper Towns. As I said earlier, a colleague hated it, and I can see why other people would. It has an average rating of 3.5. Yeah, it was fine. It was, you know, one of his earlier books. I don't think it was that bad, but yeah, it just wasn't up to the standard of his later books. 4th book I chose for this prompt is Argyle by Ellie Conway. which is a pen name of 2 people who kind of tried to remain mysterious. And so the hilarious thing is this book has very low rating, average 3.1, but if you read the reviews, it's mostly people rating it lowly because they're annoyed that it's not written by Taylor Swift. Yeah, sure, that's a reason to rate a book 2, 1 star, 2 star, whatever. So I feel like that dragged its rating down a bit, but also it is a silly book. I believe it's also a silly film. I haven't watched it. It's like it's pretending to be a spy thriller, but it's a load of nonsense. It's in the vein of like a classic. There's like art heists and high stakes and hidden Nazi treasure and bombs and super spies. Oh, and a big like rich evil Russian guy. You can't take it seriously. That's the thing. That's maybe the other reason it's got low rating, is people taking it too seriously. And also apparently it's nothing like the film. I think the film was written before the book was, or at the same time, or they liked the idea and they wrote a completely different story. Something like that. So yeah, bad reviews because it's not like the film, and bad reviews because it's not written by Taylor Swift, and bad reviews because people thought it was a proper serious book. And then 5th book for this prompt that I wrote down was Flawless Girls. Yeah, because that has a average rating also 3.1, but obviously didn't read it because I couldn't. I haven't actually read the reviews for this because I don't like to read reviews before I've read a book. My hope was that this book got such low ratings because of prejudiced people who didn't like understand intersex people, but I have no idea. It was just my vain hope that I would still enjoy the book even though I had a low rating. So can't tick that one. Can't tick the next one either. The prompt is direct from the indie author book. There's another one I feel bad about. I feel bad about all the books I didn't read, but at least some of them I had a good reason for, well, semi-good reason for not reading. This one I didn't. I've owned the book for years. It's The Dunworth Killings by, I can't remember what his pen name is, but he is a guy called Chris who used to work on the bar where I work. He wrote a book whilst he was still working there, and I bought it off him, and I haven't read it. I'm thinking about doing a video of me reading books that my friends have written, because actually over the years there's been a few of them. So yeah, let's just put that as my excuse for not reading it. Next prompt, moving on, a local author bookstore purchase. So this, I followed the rules very well. I went into my local independent bookstore with no specifications or caveats. I said to them, can you recommend a book for me? And she recommended The House of Broken Bricks by Fiona Williams, who is kind of a local author in the sense that, like, she's not from Exeter where I live, but she's studying at the local university at the moment, or at the time she released this book. So I think when it was released there were local events around it, or like launch events, and that's why it was stocked and promoted by my local independent bookstore. I liked this more than I thought I would at the beginning. It's kind of got a poetic element, which I don't always get on board with, but it worked in this book once you realise why one of the characters was talking quite poetically. Essentially, it's a contemporary family story. It's set in a small Devon town, or implied to be Devon, about a mixed race family. So the guy is white and, you know, his family have lived here for generations, and the woman is black and is originally from London but moved to Devon, like this author, for her family. And they have twin boys, but one of the boys looks very much like his mum and one looks very much like his dad. So they, I think, what's it called, like domino twins or something like that. And it's like a 1 in a million chance. So part of the story is about their family and how the tensions within, like, being a black person living in a small rural town, but also raising a boy who looks very white even though he's mixed race, and he thinks of himself as black. Like, he will refer to himself as being collectively like there's one line where he says black people like us. So that's interesting, that like how he thinks of himself, and how he fits or doesn't fit so well even within his own family, and how she fits or doesn't fit so well in the village. And it's about, I think it's set over a year, and it's a very tough year for them, and you know, tests their family bonds and life for them. Yeah, really beautiful book. So I can tick that one off. That's what we like, a nice one book prompt, which is Quirdy taking it easy on us. Okay, next is similar to the alphabet, but you have to spell your full name using the same A to Z rules of like the title or the authors. So, and it's a purple one, so I can double up. So I won't tell you my surname, but I will tell you that I read books to complete it. But I'll just tell you my first name. So obviously you know Gemma with a G. So The Goblin Emperor. For E, The Employees by Olga Haven, who is a Danish author. So this could have counted for my non-American or British or Canadian book. It is a very strange book. It's told in a series of interviews. There is no main text, it's just interview responses, and sometimes they're short and sometimes they're long, and it's people on a spaceship being interviewed by somebody who was investigating supposedly what effect there was on the crew by bringing certain artifacts onto the ship. That's the premise of the interviews. What they actually end up doing and talking about is very different, but it's not every interview in the series. You're just getting little snippets and little like views of what the hell is going on, and then it all ends very strangely. And when I got to the author's blurb at the end, I was not surprised to learn that this author is actually a poet. Very much has that kind of vibe and style. M, Mysterious Affair at Styles, and also second M, Mamo. A, At Bertram's Hotel. So yeah, for the rest of my name, which include my middle name and my surname, there weren't any new books to tell you. There were one we've talked about before. So I can tick that prompt off. Now, we come to my big fail. So I'd never heard of this thing before. Apparently there's this annual online competition amongst fantasy writers called SPFBO, which stands for Self-Published Fantasy Blog Off. And I can't say I fully understand it, but it's a big writing competition. There's several rounds, and basically this prompt is to read 5 SPFBO non-finalists, and there's a big database. I mean, the chance of me finding something I wanted to read was very much needle in a haystack, even though I do like fantasy. There's just so many, and this competition has gone on for years and years. And then the information page with all the finalists and non-finalists, it just shows you book covers. And so I did go through, I was just going off cover art, just like, oh, what looks like it might appeal. Because these are all self-published. Published, I work through Kindle Unlimited. I'm not really an Amazon girl when I, you know, if I can possibly avoid it. But I did subscribe to Kindle Unlimited for 2 or 3 months, I think, in an attempt to read some of these. But we're running into the dual problem. I didn't own any physical copies, and because of the nature of how they're published, they were all ebooks. What I'm saying is, I didn't read any. I didn't read any of them. I had a bunch of them saved as tabs on Amazon. Initially go off cover art and then read the blurb and then think, is this the kind of thing I might like? But I think I left it too late to start that process of trying to find 5 that I think I would stand a chance of liking. Oh, I just really don't want to read ebooks. I think I need to find my Kindle. Maybe that's the answer. Just like dig it out from wherever it's been buried. And maybe because it's not like a glowy screen, that might be better. But I'm purely like guessing. I don't actually know. I feel bad because Quirdy really wanted to promote independent authors and smaller and lesser known. I did a big fail. Big fail. Let's move on to my next failure. The next prompt, a completed web comic. This is another one that I just like logistically had problems with. Because I have read only one webcomic before in my life. It was Lore Olympus. It hadn't finished being written at that point. It wasn't available as a physical book. It was recommended to me and I read it on, I want to say Webtoons. I think that's the name of the website. And because it was on my big computer screen, it didn't frustrate me as much as reading an ebook on my phone. So with that as my only previous experience, I went to Webtoons and I like searched and did the filter for like a completed series, first of all, because that was the prompt. And then, oh, there was so much romance. So I was like, please any other genre than romance. So I found one I like called Madame Outlaw. And initially, I was off to a good start, reading it on my computer screen, going, you know, scroll down the page, click to next episode, still going next, blah, 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 blah. And initially, from the like landing page, I thought there were only 9 segments to this story. So I was like, oh great, short book as well. Because I remember Lore Olympus having like 100. But then I got to the end of episode 9 and there was no next chapter button, but also at the same time there was no end to the story. Like, it clearly wasn't the end of the story. And so that confused me for a while. I thought, why is it tagged as completed if there's only, like, that's clearly not how the story's meant to end. And maybe this is me being an elderly lady, but I was like, I'm sure I remember with Lore Olympus, even though it was 100 chapters, it was just at the bottom of the page there'd be the next one, the next one, the next one. You just keep going. So I did try and be, you know, a bit proactive, and I checked the Patreon of the artist author to see if they had any mention about Madame Outlaw, but they were not talking about that at all. They were completely talking about a new series they were working on. I googled it, and what came up was like a YouTube trailer. Apparently that's a thing. I even went to like the URL at the top of the web page, and where it said episode -9, I changed the 9 to a 10 and thinking that like that would load the next page. Maybe it was hidden somewhere. I couldn't see a paywall, by the way. You know, it wasn't like I was just being stingy and refusing to pay. The only thing that I then a while later realised was that on this page, Webtoons website, it was very much telling you to download the app. Like, there was banners, things saying download the app. And in retrospect, I think maybe the rest of the story is in the app, but I don't want to download the freaking app. One, I don't want to read it on my phone. Like I said, we're running into this recurring problem. I don't like ebooks, and I particularly don't like graphic novel ebooks. The tiny art. So that is why even when I saw stuff about an app, I just kind of like blanked it and ignored it. It's like, I'm not going to use the app. I don't want to create another, register another account and create another account and blah blah blah, and to read one webcomic. Which now I don't even know how many episodes there were, because I thought there were 9 and clearly there's much more than that. Who knows how many. So essentially I hit a brick wall and didn't really know where to continue, and then, or how to continue, and then the deadline for the end of the challenge rolled around and I still hadn't made any progress because I was, you know, working on other things, reading other things. So I just came to a big fat halt. So I can't tick that. Other than like, I read what I could. I read what was available on the website in the format that I could read. Anyway, moving on. Next prompt. New release read in the month it was released. This I thought was a really interesting challenge for Qwerty to set. I hope she doesn't mind me calling by her username rather than her actual name. Essentially, in a way, it's a really clever prompt because it ensures that your books don't sit on your TBR for like years and years and years, which I'm very definitely guilty of. So, read a book in the month it was released, or like within 30 days of it being released. Obviously they're kind of not all released on the 1st of the month. But I found that in practice I struggled with this because there were some months where there were no books released that I wanted to read, and I really, yeah, struggled. I was like trawling through, you know, web listings of like top 10 graphic novels released this month kind of thing, because I remember one month in particular, I think it was December, I had a book picked out in advance. I pre-ordered it, it was delivered, it was all going so well, it should have been great. It's called Hammerjang Luck. It had like, the blurb made it seem like it ticked a load of my like trope boxes that I really enjoy, but I could not get into it. And I can't even really tell you why other than writing style, because yeah, it was sci-fi, it had con men, it had a heist, it has interesting mix of characters, but there's something about The sum was not as good as the whole of its parts, unfortunately. And just kept putting it down, keep picking up, putting it, really trying, keep picking up, put it back, try and read a little bit every night. But I'd read a few pages and then I'd get bored. And I'd put it down. And the problem with the like read it within a month specification is if in that situation you're halfway through a month, 3/4 of the way through the month, and you find you're not making good progress in the book and maybe you even like want to like get rid of it, then suddenly you've only got 1 or 2 weeks left to find a new book and read it, which is why I started trawling through websites trying to find graphic novels to like squeeze into that last fragment of a month to try and get through it. Anyway, that's my excuses. So let's move on to the actual title. So July's release, I read Imposter Syndrome. This is a purple prompt so I can double up. August release, A Sorceress Comes to Call. September, We Solve Murders. October, Graveyard Shift. November, City of Destruction. December, like I said, I struggled in December, so I read a graphic novel called Yojimbot, Volume 1. This is released a few years ago in French, but it was the English release that was December last year. I mean, it was fine. Story about post-apocalyptic world, robots, very Japanesey for some reason, maybe like a theme park, and then some experiments going on, and the boy and a robot, or a bunch of robots, have to escape. I didn't really connect with it, possibly because of this like troupe of 5 people escaping together. 4 of them don't speak, they're robots, they don't talk. So a hard one to pull off. I will not be continuing the series. January, new book. I read my second Tom Hindle for the challenge, so Death in the Arctic. My god, what a disappointment. I won't tell you the specific page, but I will say within the first chapter I knew who was going to die and why they were going to die and who was going to kill them. And I read the rest of the book just hoping I was wrong. I was just like, please, please be there some twist that I don't see coming. Also, I read it, well, partly for this challenge, but also because I wanted to see how they killed the person and also how they were discovered and found out. That was the only thing I didn't know. Yeah, again, like he's gone for like a vintage style, but it's a contemporary story about a murder that happens on an airship. Again, like some insufferable rich people going to the Arctic on a helium ship. It was exactly as I thought it would be. So, and that's always disappointing in a murder mystery. Like from chapter 1, there's no satisfaction on figuring that out from chapter 1. February was Adrift in Currents Clean and Clear, so the latest in the Wayward Children series. My favourite so far. I really enjoyed it, and in a way the most heartbreaking. This follows Nadia. So this whole series of novellas, which is really fortunate for me because it meant I could catch up on these after all my December problems. They kind of had like a bit of a knock-on effect. So it follows Nadia and she's travelling to like a Russian-esque fantasy world, mostly involving turtles and her life there. Can't say too much because it's a novella. March was How to Seal Your Own Fate, which we've already talked about. April, again, just like a random graphic novel I found online to try and plug the gap. So it's Helen of Windhorn. This at least was a standalone. What is it about? It was kind of... imagine if Conan the Barbarian had a family. He's doing his like barbarian fantasy world stuff, but his child and grandchild were living in the normal world, and then circumstances around where the grandchild has to move in with this barbarian character into his stately manor home because he's very wealthy, and then she takes on the like family legacy of these like crazy weapons, and you go through the woodlands and you enter a fantasy realm and there's feasting and fighting and that kind of thing. That's essentially what it was. Yeah. Don't have any strong feelings on it. May's release was The Devils by Joe Abercrombie. The first of his books I've ever read. He's got a very famous series out, and I do have book 1 of that series somewhere. But this is it's definitely set up to be the start of a new series. I really enjoyed it. It's got mixed reviews, but I liked it. But then I don't have his other series to compare to. so maybe that plays a part. It's essentially a bunch of rogues and criminals and dangerous magic people are conscripted to be almost like a Suicide Squad situation, where they're given the job because nobody else, like, it's too dangerous for anybody else. In this particular book, their job is to transport a princess from Rome to Troy. And yeah, this is the motley crew, this bunch here. This is the Broken Binding edition. I'm not sure, could you call it found family? I don't know. I think they're kind of thrown together, not always with their own, you know, against their will or with their will, and they don't always get along, but they have to work together, and it makes for, you know, good interpersonal dynamics. And if it does become a series, I would continue it. These towers are getting a bit big. And then June's release is the reason I can't tick this prompt, unfortunately. So it's Bee Speaker by Adrian Tchaikovsky. So it's the third book in the Dogs of War series. The first book was like one of my top picks of the year a couple of years ago. I read the second book, Barehead, in preparation for this third book coming out, but it didn't actually fit in any of these prompts. But it was kind of necessary to read book 2, knowing that 3 was coming out. The only copy I could get hold of was an ebook, because it's such a new release. I had to read it like so soon after it was released. I mean, I've only recently started seeing the physical copy being advertised in British bookstores. Yeah, I mean, yeah, so I think I got like 7% of the way in before my month deadline ran out. Yeah, that kind of sucks that I was so close to finishing that prompt, but not quite. So next prompt, a top 10 book in the year you were born. This is quite a fun prompt. So I was born in 1986. I looked through the top 10 on Goodreads. The top book was a Stephen King. I think might have been it. Can't remember. So I was looking at this a while ago. Not interested in that. What my other choices were, there was a Bourne book, like Bourne Supremacy. I think I did start reading that. God, it was bad. Oh, just like unbelievable, like macho nonsense, and just like bloodshed and these men sitting in a room talking. It was so boring. And then there was a scene where he was describing the way Jason Bourne's wife was like standing by a kitchen sink, and it was so inappropriately written, like weirdly sexualized in a like not anatomically possible way. Like they basically, if he'd written she leaned against the sink, that would have been fine. Put a full stop there. That's all you need to write. But he wrote she leaned against the sink with her arms crossed, and then it was like pushing up her breasts or something, or like, I don't know, I can't remember the exact wording, but I was like trying to imagine, I mean, I'm wearing the wrong top for this, but it was just like, it's kind of described her as crossing her arms up here rather than like down here like a normal person. No, he had to mention her breasts. He just had to. He couldn't help himself. And then at that point I stopped reading because I was like, absolutely not anymore. He hadn't even said this woman's name, I think, at this point. I was like, I have no idea who this woman is and why are you talking about her breasts? Anyway, so I didn't read that. What else was there? There was The Prince of Tides, I think it was called. Some historical fiction that I'd never heard of. My boss is much older than me, said it like vaguely rang a bell with her, but she couldn't remember anything about it. There was some creepy children's book that with some realism was in the top 10. And so basically left me with Redwall, which I had tried to read many years ago, but I DNF'd because it's one of those series that I think people have a lot of nostalgia for because they read it when they were children, and so I'd heard great things about it because it's really like important work in, you know, my contemporaries' upbringings. And yeah, so I tried to read it, and then I kind of was like, oh, this is a children's book. So I stopped, but now this challenge basically forced me to pick it up again. As I said before, fantasy quest story, chosen one, kind of brave little mouse saving his people from an evil, oh god, is he a badger? Something like that. I don't think I'll continue in the series. You know, it was cute, it was fine. I'm too old to read children's books. That's what it boils down to. But I can tick that prompt because it's just the one book. No, he's not a badger. That's nonsense. Badgers are good animals. He's a rat. All stereotypes about rats. Right. Next prompt. Finish 3 books in 24 hours. Yes, I did. I did this as part of a Dewey's Readathon, I think. So, book 1, Good Girl, Bad Blood. We've already talked about it. Book 2, The Seven Secrets. A forgettable graphic novel about a secret society keeping powers to prevent the world from falling in ruin. And book 3, Horizontal Collaboration. Yeah, so 2 of those were graphic novels, but that still counts. Next prompt. I really appreciated this because this is actually a video idea I had ages ago. So the prompt is recipe in a book. So the idea is read a book that's not a cookbook, and when they mention food, cook that food that they're talking about. And I wanted to do this, like, since I set up my BookTube channel, because of this particular series. So it's the Investigator Yashim series. This is the 3rd book, maybe 4th, called The Snake Stone by Jason Goodwin. So this is a series of like detective books, but Yashim is an investigator from the Sultan's Palace. This is set in early 19th century Istanbul, so like the twilight days of the Ottoman Empire. Really interesting setting, always like good murder mystery kind of books. And the reason that this book in this series in particular that I wanted to cook something from is because it's kind of a hallmark of this series that Yashim is a really good cook, and the descriptions of the food are like so delicious and like evocative, to the point where the author released a cookbook specifically with recipes from all the different books in the series. So I have a cookbook called Yashim Cooks Istanbul to work from, and as I was reading this I was thinking about, oh, what dish could I make? The main one that stuck out to me was like a meze selection, basically, because it has to be vegetarian for me. Unfortunately, although I read this book and enjoyed it, I did not do part 2 of this prompt, which is the actual cooking. I could have done this if I'd taken a day off work. I should have just booked a day off leave and done it. You know, meze is lots of small fiddly bits rather than one big dish. And I cook once in a blue moon. That's essentially what the problem boils down to. I don't cook very often. My partner cooks most of our meals, dinners. I finish work later than him and he wants to eat at the time that I get home. So I can't cook for dinner then because I'm not home to do so. It's just, you know, a logistical problem with my own life. So I need to be more committed. I need to book a day's leave from my paid job to do unpaid work on YouTube. But I mean, delicious unpaid work. Maybe I still will one day. Yeah, I'd still like to do that. So no tick for me for that prompt, unfortunately. There are no such things as half ticks. Right, next purple prompt. The genre challenge. So the genres outlined, title of each one, it's purple, so we've mostly talked about them before. So fantasy, Marmo, as I said, is about witches. Sci-fi, The Cybernetic Tea Shop. Mystery / thriller, The Mysterious Affair at Styles. Horror, 2120. Romance, this is a new title because I don't read romance very often, but this is Paladin's Faith by T. Kingfisher. Not actually a romance writer, but the only romance I read, and it's romantasy as well on top of that. Can't tell you much about this because it's like the 4th book in a series, but the series overall is called the Saint of Steel series, and it's set within the world of the White Rat. Each book follows a paladin of a god that was murdered. So all these paladins, they're kind of a bit adrift. There's 7 of them, so hopefully there'll be 7 books. So they are working for a different god, the god of the White Rat. It's basically to have something to do and to have some purpose in their life. And so each one of the books is, there's an overarching story of a murder mystery and like a serial killer. And then there's the overarching mystery of like, how did their god die? Like, what the hell happened? And then, as I said, each book follows a particular paladin, and because of the romantasy series, each book follows them finding a partner. This book kind of goes back to a character that we met in the 1st book. They come back onto the scene because their life is in danger, and they need to hire a paladin to like bring things back to right and bring a bunch of criminals to justice. And they have a right old rompy time together. The next genre, so historical, so The Rose Rent. Non-fiction, The Sea Around Us. And literary, another new book, Portrait of a Thief by Grace D. Lee. This is the book I talked about in my video footage where I only have the first half, not the second half, which is really annoying because I gave quite a good breakdown and review of this book. Essentially, this is a story of a heist, art heist. Again, it's actually weird that this I read so close to Argylle because it's kind of the same thing but approached from very different ways. This takes itself much more seriously, and yet could not rate it highly because the whole premise behind this situation is such nonsense. It's essentially a billionaire hires a bunch of university students to steal art from world-class, high-secure museums so they can all be returned to the billionaire, whatever, home country, China, which is where the art is from. But it's just so stupid. Like, why would you hire a bunch of university students for this? Like, one is an art historian, but like one is a medical student, and one just like drives fast cars as a hobby, and one is just like the sister of the art history. It's like, I can have suspension of disbelief, but not for this. This just doesn't make sense. But yes, literary fiction. So despite that being a load of nonsense, I have at least completed that prompt. Right, then we have another problem book for me. So the prompt is crowdfunded book. I don't quite know what went wrong with this. I went on, was it Kickstarter or Indiegogo? One of those. I found a book which sounded okay. It was like a series of detective story kind of series. It's called Dirk Diggins' Private Eye by, this must be a fake name, Thaddeus Tufton-Samer. I did pledge. But then, come, you know, a year later, and I'm trying to wrap up this challenge, I go back to Kickstarter to find this book that I pledged and presumed had funded. I don't think it needed 100% funding. That's another reason I chose it. I was like, well, I'm like guaranteed to get it. Anyway, so I went back to Kickstarter, tried to get it, and then it was like, oh, this Kickstarter has been cancelled. And it's definitely my fault for not checking the emails that they send you whenever you pledge to something. Because I went back through the emails, and at some point, yes, there was some technical thing around Kickstarter and Amazon, and the author had done something wrong with like setting up the Kickstarter, and so the whole thing got cancelled and my money was never taken, and it was only a small amount. I wouldn't have noticed that it wasn't taken, and so there was no book for me that I had contributed to crowdfunded to. I'm not sure I would have had time to read it anyway, and it would have been an ebook, so we know how well they've been going. So no tick, basically, is what I'm saying. Right, next prompt. It's the purple one, the rainbow challenge. So it's about the colours of the cover of the books. So red, Death of a Bookseller. Orange, City of Destruction. This cover is kind of red, but underneath the book is orange. Yellow, The Faint of Heart. It's one of the ones I can't find, but trust me, it was yellow. I mean, that's kind of yellow. Creamy yellow. Green, The Mysterious Affair at Styles. Blue, The Sea Around Us. It's very faded, but underneath it is blue. Purple, new book. The Last Devil to Die, very purple. The latest Thursday Murder Club, Richard Osman. Again, can't tell you much now that we're so many books into the series. The mystery of this did not take me as much by surprise as earlier books have. I just had like a suspicion about the underlying crime behind it, just because of my personal knowledge about like archaeology. That's basically all I can say. Pink, this is not a drill. White, The Orchid Thief, but it could also be, you know, Good Girl, Bad Blood. Black, A Sorceress Comes to Call. That's what I've got written down, but you know, could be any of these. And then brown, I wrote Argylle. There, yeah. So, yay, I can tick it off. Next prompt, a classic and its adaptation. So for a classic, I did Bertram's Hotel, which we talked about right at the beginning for the A for the alphabet. Oh, it's right under, it's completely overshadowed here. Like I say, Miss Marple, this is her visiting a place called Bertram's Hotel in London, and then her observations about the people coming and going and how they may or may not be linked to each other, and then people go missing and turn up in strange circumstances and Miss Marple figuring it all out and whatever happened. And then the adaptation is this new series of Marple stories by new authors, so taking the classic and reinterpreting it, and some of them are putting a new twist on the story. So like one author, I can't remember which one, I read it so long ago, but she basically introduced an Afro-Caribbean character who's a friend of Miss Marple's, and then so they have a like new adventure together. So some are very much still set in the same time and place and the same Miss Marple, and some are new. So one followed Miss Marple's great-grandniece, I think it was. So really, Miss Marple wasn't in it very much at all. I can't remember who wrote which story though. I think that counts as an adaptation, even though it's not a retelling. So I can tick that off. Okay, we're getting near the end, so 2 more prompts left. 1, 3 protagonist names of people you know. So, first book I chose, Death of a Bookseller. There's a character called Laura. That's also the name of my sister-in-law. Book number 2, We Solve Murders. There are characters called Amy and Steve. I know real life Amy and Steve, not related to them this time. And then book number 3, The Goblin Emperor. There's a character called Maya. I used to work with a Maya. Even the same spelling, even though this is a male character. It's spelled the same way as the girl I know. Anyway, so tick tick, come on, work, there you go. And then final prompt, a book for every season. And for this I very deliberately went for a specific set of books, not just a book set in spring, a book set in winter. I went for this series that I've had for a while. So they are short story collections: Midsummer Mysteries, Sinister Spring, Autumn Chills, and I have already read Midwinter Murders, so I chose instead The Adventure of the Christmas Pudding, which is the title of the main story, but it's still a short story collection in this style. Yeah, I've owned them for a while, and so when I saw this prompt I thought thematically ties in perfectly. So I can tick it off, and then I'll scroll up and see if I've got any bingo lines. Save, right, scroll up, scroll up. Well, that's disappointing. How many did I get? How many squares? I mean, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 out of 25. So more than half. Have I done better or worse than you thought I would? Because I thought I did about half of the prompts. So the fact I did more than half is good. And yet, I mean, I guess that's just the way the cookie crumbles sometimes, and like you can do a lot of prompts but they're not going to actually line up in a... Really? What's the nearest I got? I've got 2 that only have 1 prompt missing. If I had read 5 books from 5 small booktubers, and or if I'd read, find a book with 3 or more blurbs and read the books blurbed. So in terms of those specific prompts, I read 1 of the 5 books from small booktubers, and I read, how many was it, 2? Yeah, 2 of the linked blurbs. They're both 5 books, aren't they? No, the blurbs book was 4 books total. So I half completed that prompt. So that's the nearest I got. If I'd read Middle Game and Looking Glass Sound, I would have got that central. See, part of me is now like, maybe I should have been more strategic and really sussed out in advance how, like, what my closest line would have been. I mean, the challenge rules say that you should aim for a blackout doing all the squares, but I think we can see that that was not realistic for me. Were there any easy wins that I was just a fool for not doing? The cookery one. I was foolish for not realising the crowdfunder thing had been cancelled. I was perhaps a bit foolish about the webcomic, and I shouldn't have been such a stick in the mud and should have got the app. I should have read the Dunworth Killings. That is... If I'd read Flawless Girls, that would have got me 2 more prompts. Not the 2 I needed, but 2 more. But I really don't feel like... the fact that I couldn't get that book wasn't my fault, but if I'd realised that sooner, I could have found an alternative. Not that I feel like there are many alternatives, but yeah, I think those are my big regrets. Oh, should I finish Bee Speaker? Could I have? I mean, I got 7% of the win, so I don't think I would have completed it within a month. Oh well. I mean, I feel like the only prompts I was out by a mile were Swift for Beau and book recommendations from small booktubers. Should have recommended myself a book. That would have maybe qualified. Anyway, okay, so no lines for me.